bike technology seems to be holding cyclists back. Crashes are way, way up, like dangerously up, in spite of all the safety protocol stuff. So why is that? The fact there are so many crashes now reinforces that there's something wrong with the bike in the pro peloton. Even if you're not interested in pro racing or don't want to do any of that stuff, your friends that say, hey, you need this Aero handlebar or Aero jersey or the socks. Socks are important. I definitely get the Aero socks. But this helps explain why those gains that are in wind tunnels don't prove out in reality. If you're riding a wind tunnel, go for it. But if you're riding in a group, crosswinds, all that stuff I mentioned about weight, bike weight, same issue, even more so here. So bike tech with human performance. Road racing is both human performance and bike technology because the bike plays a pretty big role in the outcome of the race. Human performance, much bigger portion for sure, but there is some portion that the bike makes a difference. I've done full data for the past 26 years of what I call the grade 8 road races, the 3 Grand Tours, which are a total of 64 days of racing. And then the 5 monument races, which are some of the most important, longest lasting races. So taking those 8 biggest, most important races over the past 26 years, the speed increase of those races increased by 5% over 26 years. And the World Championship time trial, which I'm including for a number of reasons, over that same time period, the speeds increased by 3.5%. So on average, 4.2% speed increase per mile. Now, you could wonder, is that a lot? Is that good, that bad? It's hard to, in a vacuum, to say if that's good or bad. One thing I'll note as an aside is the races have actually been getting shorter. So these speeds don't account for the shorter races, so that the speeds should be even faster than they're showing up here, but whatever. Trying to parse out the human performance element of these road races, you've got races that are primarily human performance. So 50K Nordic ski, which is about a 2-hour event, 10K swim, which is 2 hours, and a half marathon, which is about an hour, which happens to be the same endurance level as the World Championship time trial. So these are all World Championship events, the pinnacle of performance, and they average 6.4% speed gain over the same time period, 26 years. The Nordic skiing is nearly 10%, over 9%, almost twice what road racing is, about 50% more than the average of world time trials and the grade 8. That is really weird. I've worked on this a lot. I've tried to understand why that is the opposite of what should happen. Road racing, because there's this high-tech bike that's helping you do all these things, their performance is third worse or more than sports that the technology is not the center. Skiing, sure, the skis are super important. Running shoes, clothing, gear is important, but it's a small portion compared to the way that bikes are talked about influencing races. When you look online and run all these calculators that people use, when you parse out the bike tech only, I did 3 different ways. If you get 100 watts of gain, which is super easy to do on paper, you see an 11% benefit. This is wind tunnel, perfect conditions, all that kind of stuff.
Can you explain a little bit more about how you get the 100-watt gain?
Yeah. Oh man, Aero socks, that's the biggest one. Aero helmet, Aero bike frame, and internal cable routing, and tires and tubes, and doing that in the right way.
You're adding each of those things up.
Yeah, stacking them up. Yeah. And I bet I could get 200 watts if I really, like big jockey wheels with the ceramic bearings is 5 grams, and then waxing your chain. I could go on forever about all these improvements that you get. And I get that people do this all the time. Waxing chains is the hot thing right now.
You don't wax your chain.
I don't even oil my chain. Other things to do. But I think it's 5 watts. But that's how I chose 100 watts, because anybody that's into Aero stuff would be, yeah, I could save 100 watts of power. So that would equate at the speeds of the road races we're talking about, counting for those speeds, 11% increase in speed over that 26 years. And then I used a 51 watt gain. And the reason I used that was because it matches exactly the road grade 8 races at 5.04% improvement. So in this context, the improvement of 5% is 51 watts. of improvement over 26 years. So that's what, 2 watts a year. Okay. And then the last thing, because we build frames, if you're really lucky at 26 miles an hour, 25 miles an hour, the road racer UCI guys are doing, you save about 2%. So the point of all of this is that none of this adds up. You get all these aero gains, and where are they going? Human performance, it's really difficult to argue that Nordic skiers are improving faster because the sport isn't as evolved. I don't think that's true at all. And running, that's been happening forever, longer than cycling, that they still can manage gains that exceed cycling. And with this bike tech that's saving me 100 watts or more, none of it adds up in the real world. And that's what we care about at cyclists. Okay. So the question is, what are the measurable Aero watts gains? And the answer to me is they're not here. They don't show up in the actual real world data. And I can talk about that for hours because there's so much to that. So the point is, the bike tech that's making all these races so much faster, the data doesn't support that at all. In fact, the data shows the opposite, which doesn't make any sense. I 100% agree. Bike tech should make you faster, and it shouldn't make it any more dangerous. No one would say, yes, we have this bike tech that makes you faster, but the consequence is your chances of crashing increase. Nobody would do that. However, that's actually what's happening, not intentionally, but the data shows that. This is past 12 years, injuries through crashing, all UCI road races, racers that race in UCI.
All of the data that Rob was able to pull is for men.
Yeah, and I use this because the data is available. For women, I tried to run some data and it's much sparser. So there's been a threefold increase in crashes in a decade. And particularly the past 5 years, it's really gone out of control. As of today, a little over 4 months into the season, we're already above most of the year, like half decade ago. So we're on schedule to break 500 crashes. What does that mean? It just means we're going to be at 500% of where we were a decade ago. Okay, why would that be? Is it because races are getting so much faster? And that's what people talk about. Faster races, they're dangerous. There's a ton of talk about limiting gearing for races. And I'm all for figuring out how to make things safer. But the speed increase, I think, is a red herring overall, because you have a 5.5% speed increase over the past decade and a 300% increase in crashes. So there's no correlation between those two. And there's all these things that have happened to make racing safer. I think the things trying to make racing safer far outstrip the things that make it more dangerous, like road furniture and some other things. We spent a lot of time about looking at, like, how are we wrong about this data? Because it's so off the charts bad. But there's a bunch of things that should make racing safer. The first thing that people tend to say when I talk about this is races are getting longer, more miles per year. So you're going to have more crashes because there's more miles. Yeah, absolutely. First thing is races are actually getting shorter, which is crazy. I thought they were getting longer, but they have been getting shorter. Not by much, but road racing is like 6-7% shorter over the past 26 years. And then this is the same data that we just looked at on the other slide. This is a mileage increase. There's been a 15% increase over the past decade, all Grand Tour races, the primary races. So 15% is not nothing, but when you look at it, you actually see that this period where we had the longest races, the net result was not really a fundamentally different results on average of crashes that had been happening before and after. It's only in the past few years that things have gone off the charts. And the mileage has not really, it's 15% is 15%, but it does not account. I'm sure that's some portion of people more fatigued and all that, but it's not a 3x, it's not a 1x, it should be single digits. We take the speed data, that speeds are not getting higher. Aerodynamics doesn't seem to make a difference. Crashes are way, way up, like dangerously up, in spite of all the safety protocol stuff. So why is that? Like, how do those three things connect in some way to show there's a problem? And I think they do, in that the bikes are getting more aero, although there's no benefit to it. 8 watts of power is not a real thing. as bikes get more aero, they get vertically stiffer. As bikes get lighter, which the Tour neutralizes that because there's a fixed weight they can't go below, which is nice because that takes that out of the equation. So you got these stiffer, harsher bikes, even though there's a much bigger tire profile. So the control of the bikes is much worse. People cannot handle the bikes as well as they could a decade ago. And you can see that in races when you watch them. It's obvious that the accidents, not all of them, but too many of them are control issues from riders nowadays are such better bike handlers. So if I'm a rider who doesn't really care about any of these things, the point is when aerodynamics don't matter, so don't worry about getting the internal cable routing. We offer it. We're happy to do it for those that want it, but that's not giving you a performance gain. Saving 300 grams going with a super light carbon bike or super light carbon wheels or whatever, the real world performance is just non-existent at that kind of weight difference. And when you do buy into those things, you get a bike that doesn't handle and control as well, because I cannot figure out why else we got 3x crashes. So going full circle, the vertical flow that we can get out of the bike, not necessarily the comfort is a side result, a consequence of us designing a bike where the wheels stay planted on the ground, no matter what's going on. So we get a lot of vertical flow. The wheels are connected to the ground. The rider's connected to the ground, not in a harsh way, not in a that's going to beat you up, but you feel like you are on the ground, planted on the ground. Sometimes that feels not as fast as a carbon bike that you can feel the vibration of the road. It's just chattering. Sometimes that is a sense of speed, like vibration is your brain saying that the speed is happening. Speed comes through control and through stiffness, but stiffer of drivetrain, not of overall structure of the bike or wheels or handlebar or any of that stuff. It's really focusing on drivetrain. So drivetrain stiffness, vertical flow, those are two of the fundamental philosophical ways that we approach bike building. And it's data driven, and showing you some of this, that how we triangulate into what is it that makes these newer bikes worse than ever from a handling standpoint. Poor handling reduces speeds. The speeds of the races do not make sense given what in skiing, running, and swimming. The bike technology seems to be holding cyclists back. The fact there are so many crashes now reinforces that there's something wrong with the bike in the pro peloton, what's being chased by the bike companies.